Welcome back to the NutriMedical Report, and again, amazing breakthroughs here. Let's go through some of the other amazing facts here. If people were to follow this diet in terms of weight loss and vascular disease, and of course by early into 2011, this test called the urinary thromboxane B2, that's THROMBOXANE B2. It'll be announced, of course, on zonediet.com and Dr. Sears, that's DRSEARS.com. This is a urine test, so they're doctors, chiropractors, naturopaths, nutritionists, special trainers. This needs to become a public health policy. We need to not have, quote, fast food restaurants. You should go to the restaurant and get, freshly, let's say steamed vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and so on. There should be, proper portions of protein that are not cooked in vegetable-based oils. Deep frying in vegetable-based oils, I'm sure I know what your opinion is going to be about this, but isn't it horrendous that they're deep frying in vegetable-based oils?
Well, it is, except for one thing. It makes food taste better. and that's why people do it. I one time I had a talk with the head of Health and Human Services, and he said, "Yeah, I understand what you're talking about." I said, "If we could basically have everybody follow your dietary programs, within 6 months we'd have a healthier country." But he said, "Here's my problem. In that same 6-month period, you would destroy agribusiness as we know it, and that's a political problem."
Well, the agribusiness right now is driven primarily by the big marketers, and we saw this in this Food Inc. movie, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, where agribusiness is driven by McDonald's and this corporation, that corporation, and they've literally taken small numbers of different foods and combined it in thousands of ways, and much of the things they combine are omega-6 fats, high fructose corn syrup, which, by the way, they're extracting and have been in 3 major plants in America using a form of mercury alkali, which is even worse because you're getting mercury poisoning. And then, of course, adding other additives to change the flavor with aspartame, MSG, Splenda, and other horrible things they add to it to modify your taste buds. It's not really food anymore. It's food-ish, I guess, would be a better term for it.
It's food-ish, but let's put the finger of blame where it firmly belongs.
Right.
That's the American taxpayer.
Right.
Because we spend $20 billion a year supporting the basic industries that make those type of processed foods possible.
Right.
If it wasn't for the government subsidies for cheap carbohydrates and cheap vegetable oils, we would not have a processed food industry because the raw materials would be much, much more expensive.
So in other words, it's the subsidies that are allowing it. Do you think it's now gotten so big, the monster of agribusiness has gotten so big, and now they want to increase production, so they're now genetically modifying food, which we know our Academy of Environmental Medicine's put out a moratorium saying this is even worse. It's adding more inflammation. In fact, we're trying to do a study between the ISO line, which is the non-GMO original seeds, and the GM seeds on looking at autoimmune disease, inflammatory markers, and I would like to see a difference where we have animals and people that eat GM food. I'll make a bet the urinary thromboxane, even with the same fatty acid concentration, is going to be higher. That GM animals and people that eat genetically modified further adds more inflammation to their body.
I would not be surprised. I mean, the data hasn't been, the experiments have not been done, so I can't say quickly, but I would not be surprised that you see a higher burden of inflammation.
Yeah.
But that's the price Americans have chosen for cheap food. In Japan, food's a lot more expensive, and guess what? The portion sizes are a lot less. We have the cheapest food in the world today, and we're paying the price for it. Like in our economy, our number one industry is taking care of sick people. That is $2 trillion a year. Our number two industry is the agribusiness, which is $1 trillion a year.
Wow.
And so these are very, very big industries and have, very, very powerful political forces on their side, and they're not going to change readily.
Right.
But that's okay. You don't have to wait for the government to make some pronouncement. You can start basically turning your diet into an anti-inflammatory diet in your own kitchen and take control of your genetic future.
Yeah, and of course, we now have these gene snip tests that can measure it. And you mentioned that 2/3 of the population have gene tendencies toward inflammation. What happens to the 1/3 that eat the bad diet? Do they have effects that are silent or affect them in different ways?
Well, they're increasing the levels of toxic fat also. I mean, I've worked with a lot of Olympic athletes, and every one I've worked with has high levels of toxic fat, even though they look good in a swimsuit. So they're genetically, their genes that would predispose others to increasing body fat are not being expressed, but other genes are.
Right. In other words, they'll get cancer maybe, but they
see, people who might be running a marathon and get cancer the next week. How could this happen?
Right. So in other words, they're not going to end up getting fat and diabetic. They're going to just get cancer.
Exactly. So that if you want to live a longer and better life, what you've got to do, you've got to reduce the levels of inflammation in your body.
Right. And this is epigenetics. In other words, the effect of the environment and diet on genes. So what you're saying, Dr. Sears, is that if you don't heed this warning, if you don't measure your thromboxane in your urine, if you don't change in your own kitchen and your choices, you may not be going down the pathway to becoming fat or diabetic or going blind, but you're going to get cancer. In other words, the devil's going to get you one way or the other. It'll be either sautéed or flambéed, but you're going to be cooked.
You're quite right. And the fact is, the one thing money cannot buy is your health. And once you lose it, you realize how valuable it is and how hard it is to regain it. So if you want to maintain your health as long as possible, you have only one mission to do. I've got to reduce the levels of inflammation, and that will be a lifelong struggle, but the end product is well worth it.
Yeah, now, of course, a lot of times it's interesting to the flavonoid content, and I remember researching this as well. And my father was a gemologist, and I have a polariscope on one of my shelves in my study here. And you can actually go around an organic farm, and if you crush them down and put it under the polariscope, which is a polarized light microscope, the sugar content is parallel to the flavonoids, is parallel to the mineral content of the food. And our foods are more and more depleted of flavonoids, regular foods. If you grow your own food, if you remineralize it, it's going to have much higher flavonoid content. It's have much higher brightness in the colors, and it'll show better flavors. So people don't understand that if you grow your own food, if you eat organic, it's higher mineral content, higher flavonoid content, and you're going to live longer.
Well, and that's really the key thing for organic foods. Not that they're free of pesticides and herbicides, but because they're free of herbicides and pesticides, they have to make more polyphenols because that's the only way they can attack and defend themselves against parasites and microbial invasions.
Wow, that's kind of looking at it backwards. In other words, the food has to be stronger to survive because you haven't propped it up with Bacillus thuringiensis genes shot in with
exactly, and so that's the reason why you want organic food, because it has more of these. Our most primitive parts of our immune system, called the innate immune system, are identical to those in plants. So the things that make plants strong will make our innate immune system also strong.
Well, that explains why the best winemakers are up on the mountains up in, say, Santa Clara County in Northern California, where the climate can be variable, and the extra stress makes them make more polyphenols, so it makes a better quality wine.
Exactly. And basically, and actually, the one berry that we work with is grown in Patagonia, down in the southern part of Chile, and it's a very, very rough climate down there.
Right.
But it has the highest levels of polyphenols known to medical science.
What's that one?
And this is called the Mackey berry.
Ah, the Mackey. What about acai and some of these other ones that you talk about?
Oh, those are fine, but they're about 1/3, or actually about one third the levels of polyphenols you find in the Mackey berry.
Wow! And now is somebody marketing the Mackey berry soon, or about to?
No, actually we are working with the planters down there. It's not a domestic plant, so you have to gather the berries by hand.
Oh, you're kidding! So if somebody's smart, they'll start growing Mackey berries maybe in greenhouses in California.
You could, but then you won't have the environmental stress that makes them strong in the first place.
Unless you have an artificially induced stressful environment.
Yeah, basically you could turn the thermostat of the greenhouse down to about 4 degrees centigrade.
How about not having any warming in the greenhouse? You just
exactly.
That's really interesting, amazing. See, if you separate yourself from the natural world, you start to get health problems. And industry doesn't look at it; they just think about how much can we turn out, don't they?
Well, they do, but that's their job. Our job as individuals is to step back and say, okay, what makes good common sense?
Amazing. We need to get you back on soon. Dr. Barry Sears, this has been an amazing program. I'd like to have you back on really soon. Again, get the book, Toxic Fat. You can get it at Amazon.com. Of course, your websites are Dr. Sears, drsears.com, and zonediet.com. Thank you, Dr. Barry Sears. Amazing program. Again, heed the warning and take notice. It's up to you to figure out what you need to do next. Don't just be a victim of agribusiness and government policy. Thank you, Dr. Sears.